As we start Black History Month, I rise to discuss a national hero that I've spoken about many times on the Senate floor. With this year's Black History Month focused on African American women, it's all the more appropriate for me to talk about Maryland's Harriet Ross Tubman and her dedication to justice, equality, and service to this country. In my career, I've spoken on the Senate floor, at events in Maryland, in meetings with constituents and with my colleagues about Harriet Tubman's legacy. While I hope each opportunity I've taken to discuss the life of this remarkable woman helps raise the awareness about her importance to the history of our great nation, my ultimate goal is to properly commemorate her life and her work by establishing the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historical Park on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and I'm working with my colleagues from New York to establish the Harriet Tubman National Historic Park in Auburn, New York. A year ago this week, I reintroduced the Harriet Tubman National Historic Park and the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historical Park Act with Senators Schumer, Mikulski, and Gillibrand as original co-sponsors. I'm happy to say that since that time, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee held a positive hearing on the bill, and the Energy Committee favorably reported the bill, and it has been placed on the Senate calendar. I thank my colleagues on the committee for their support, particularly Chairman Bigeman and Ranking Member Murkowski, and the Chairman of the National Park Subcommittee, Senator Udall of Colorado. The establishment of the Harriet Tubman Historical Parks has been years in the making and is long overdue. The mission of the National Park Service has evolved over time from preserving our natural wonders across the United States for recreational purposes to commemorating unique places of significance to historical events and extraordinary Americans that have shaped our nation. The woman who is known to us as Harriet Tubman was born in approximately 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland, and given the name Armina Minnie Ross. She spent nearly 30 years of her life in slavery on Maryland's Eastern Shore. She worked on a number of different plantations on Maryland's Eastern Shore, and as a teenager, she was trained to be a seamstress. As an adult, she took the first name Harriet, and when she was 25 years old, married John Tubman. In her late 20s, Harriet Tubman escaped from slavery in 1849. She fled in the dead of night, navigating the maze of tidal streams and wetlands that to this day compromise the Eastern Shore landscape. She did this alone, exercising incredible courage and strength. Not satisfied with attaining her own freedom, she returned repeatedly for more than 10 years to the places of her enslavement in Dorchester and Caroline counties, where under the most adverse conditions she led away many family members and other slaves to freedom in the northeastern United States. She helped develop a complex network of safe houses and recruited abolitionist sympathizers residing along secret routes connecting the southern slave states and the northern free states. No one knows exactly how many people she led to freedom or the number of trips between the north and south she led, but the legend of her work was an inspiration to a multitude of slaves seeking freedom and to abolitionists fighting to end slavery. Tubman became known as the Moses of her people by African Americans and white abolitionists alike. She is the most famous, the most important conductor of the network of resistance known as the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War, Tubman served the Union forces as a spy, a scout, and a nurse. She served in Virginia, Florida, and South Carolina. She is credited with leading slaves from those slave states to freedom during those years as well. Following the Civil War and the emancipation of all black slaves, Tubman settled in Auburn, New York. There, she was active in the women's suffrage movement, and she also established one of the first incorporated African-American homes for the aged to care for the elderly. In 1903, she bequeathed the Tubman home to the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in Auburn, where it stands to this day. Harriet Tubman died in Auburn in 1913, and she is buried in the Fort Hill Cemetery. Fortunately, many of the structures and landmarks in New York remain intact and in relatively good condition. Only recently has the Park Service begun establishing units dedicated to the lives of African Americans. Places like Booker T. Washington National Monument on the campus of Tuskegee University in Alabama, the George Washington Carver National Monument in Missouri, the Buffalo Soldiers at Guadalupe Mountain National Park, the National Historical Trail commemorating the March for Voting Rights from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, and most recently, the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial on the National Mall. These are all important monuments and places of historical significance to help tell the story of the African American experience. As the National Park Service continues its important work to recognize and preserve African American history by providing greater public access and information about the places and people that have shaped the African American experience, there are very few units dedicated to the lives of African American women, and there's no National Historical Park commemorating African American women. I cannot think of a more fitting hero than Harriet Tubman to be the first African American woman to be memorialized with a National Historical Park that tells her story and her fight against institutions of slavery and the work on the Underground Railroad. I hope that my colleagues will support my effort to honor Harriet Tubman and support the passage of my bill to authorize the creation of the Tubman National Historic Parks in New York and Maryland. Let me just point out that the landscape in which she lived in exists today, and that will be an incredible part of a national park that can tell the story, particularly to young people, about the courage of this extraordinary woman. The structures exist in Auburn, New York, which complement her life as the conductor of the Underground Railroad, as well as her later life in helping advance the rights of all people. It's an incredible opportunity for us to honor her with this national park and to help future generations understand the history of America and the courage of this extraordinary leader and hero of our nation, Harriet Tubman.